Alrighty, so I decided today, it was earlier today that I released the donut shop review, where I went to the Little Donut Factory in Hilliard, Ohio. If you have not yet watched that video, I suggest you go back and check it out now. Maybe I'll even link it in the description below. But regardless, this topic of police officers eating donuts, I would like to address that. And then I would also like to address where I'm coming from when I talk about donuts. So, the first topic for discussion is going to be, why do people associate cops and donuts? Oh, and by the way, I'm in my backyard. I got a new light. It's back behind the camera there, and I'm testing it out. And I'm just looking for new places that I can film that I feel comfortable just kind of talking. Because when I'm sitting behind my desk, I don't always have it. So hopefully you guys enjoy the backyard setting while it lasts, because here in Ohio, it's currently October 8th as I record this. It's going to start getting cold soon, so we're not going to be able to do this for much longer. But anyway, speaking of getting cold, back in the day, like way back in the day, police officers didn't have radios, and there weren't telephones all over the place. They didn't have cars. What they would have to do was they'd have to actually walk their beat. So you would be in a city center area, and you'd have to walk from building to building to building. You would check door handles, all that kind of stuff. I suppose you would check on bars, make sure there's nothing going on there. You'd have to stop at call boxes. So there'd be like a police call box. You'd pick up the phone, call into headquarters real quick, and they would tell you if you're needed anywhere. So if you think that dispatch times are slowed now, just imagine back then. I couldn't even tell you what years these were, because I haven't done my research. I just kind of sat down to do this video. But imagine calling in for the police and then them telling you, all right, we'll send an officer as soon as one's available. And then you have to wait for that officer to make his rounds and make it to a call box and actually call in and say, hey, do you have anything you need me to do? And then he would be told, oh yeah, you need to go over to, I don't know, down on whatever, West Broad Street. And then he'd make his way down there on foot. That would take a long time. So people had to be a lot more self-sufficient back then. But regardless, so he's walking his beat, and if it was the evening time, there's not any businesses open. The only businesses that were typically open at that time were going to be bakeries. And if it was bad weather or cold weather, police officers would often step inside to a bakery to say hi to the people that were baking that night, and it was customary that they would hand him something that they were baking. So that's where the whole donut thing came from. An officer would step into a bakery, they'd hand him a donut, he would sit there, stay out of the cold for a little while, have a nice fresh donut, and then he would say, thanks a lot, see you later, and go back on patrol. So that's where the whole cops and donut thing came from, if you were not aware. Now, as far as my perspective on donuts, I grew up in a small town, and I had to walk to school uphill both ways in 3 feet of snow every day. But the beautiful thing about the school that I went to, at least in my younger years before I went to high school, was in between school and my house was a grocery store that had a bakery. And this wasn't like a Kroger's like we have now. This was an old school family owned grocery store. Had a bakery in there, and they would come in at, I don't know, 3, 4 in the morning and start baking donuts. So I would very frequently stop at the local bakery on the way into school, and it was as a matter of fact, it had its own door. There was a major grocery store that you could go in the front doors and you could go to the back to where the bakery was. But the bakery also had its own separate door, so when the grocery store wasn't open, but the bakery was at like 6:30 in the morning, you could walk in the side door and go in, and I would often walk in and say, hey, and I was, 12 years old at the time, and I'd stand in there, probably not able to see over the counter, like, hey, can I have whatever's fresh? So I would literally eat whatever the freshest donut they had was. when I went in the mornings. And then they also had the famous day-old donuts were, I think, like 15 cents or something back then. It was ridiculous. I think a standard donut was a quarter, a fancy donut was like 49 cents, and then you can get your day-olds. You get a whole bag of day-olds for like $1. But a couple things that I remember about donuts as a kid was the glazed donuts. They were like almost as big as your head. They were this big around, and they were real raised donuts. So they would have to make the dough, proof the dough. It had yeast. They would rise, and when you bit into a glazed donut, a yeasty glazed donut, and you pulled on it, that gluten and everything in the bread, it would stretch out the dough. Even though it was fully cooked, it would be a stretchy, springy dough. And when you chew on it, there was like a chew to that kind of dough. So from that day forth, I was ruined for all other donuts, as I'm realizing that my sleeves are all jacked up right now. So for me to enjoy a good donut, it has to have a really good chew, and then the dough has to have a really good pull. Which leads me to my next kind of topic, is a lot of the donuts shops that people are recommending are some of these national and international donut chains. I may do a review on some of those, but I can already tell you that for the type of donuts that I like, none of those are going to make the list. This jet's going to be too loud. I live really close to an airport. But those places, I'm fairly certain they get their dough frozen and pre-shaped. If not, it's just they mix water in it. I don't think there's a lot of raising and a lot of like real craftsmanship involved in the baking of those donuts. So they're just not gonna be my favorite. The other thing is most of those places are kind of lazy. So I told you before, I judge my donuts based on the quality of their glazed donut and the quality of their cream-filled donut. Most of those places have round cream-filled donuts, and that does not count as far as I'm concerned. Plus, they just don't make anything in-house. Everything is shipped in. So what I'm going to be doing is I'll be traveling around central Ohio. I'm going to try to do everything will be within 45 minutes of my house. And I'm going to go to all these local places that you pretty much can't find if you don't live in central Ohio. I'll be judging their donuts, figuring out which ones are my favorite. And then when I hit 5,000 subscribers, I'll go get a dozen of my favorite donuts, bring them home and eat them. And I will tell you, if I wanted to just grab the easiest dozen donuts to eat, it would be a dozen Krispy Kreme donuts. And I would probably microwave them first and let some of the sugar drip off, because I did eat a dozen Krispy Kreme donuts one time before with my children, and it was a horrible experience. Not because I was so full, but because they put so much freaking sugar on the outside of their donuts. So anyway, I just wanted to come out, test the camera and the lighting here in the backyard at night, tell you guys a little bit of a story, let you know where my head's at on things, and we're gonna kind of go from there. So thanks for watching. I'll talk to you guys soon.